I should have known the moment I got the text that tonight would be the night my life split open like a fault line. My name is Octavia Morrigan, and when my phone buzzed in my hand at 6:30, the screen lighting up with a message that read, "Emergency family meeting, 7 p.m. Be there, asterisk." I felt my stomach tighten into a sailor's knot. I pushed through. Inside, the air was warm but stale, perfumed with roses and the faint rot of secrets left too long in the dark. The hallway was lined with oil portraits of ancestors I could never live up to. I caught my own reflection in the gilt mirror near the foyer. My black coat was wrinkled from the tube-ride, hair half falling from its bun. I looked nothing like the icy goddess my mother always demanded. I could already hear them in the drawing room, voices overlapping, brittle with the tension that only blood relatives can conjure. I stepped in, and every pair of eyes turned to me like I was a specimen on a slide. My father, Malcolm Morrigan, leaned back in his leather chair, a glass of scotch balancing on his knee. Beside him, my mother, Celeste, perched on the edge of the sofa as though the furniture might reject her. And then there was my older brother, Patrick, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hair slicked back, looking every bit the golden boy they wished I'd been. The Morrigan name once meant legacy, power, old money tied up in English manors and Manhattan brownstones, investments my grandfather made before the First Great War. But these days, it feels like a leash. And tonight, that leash was about to strangle me. The Morrigan house looked as it always did, grand, cold, and so perfectly curated that you could break your neck slipping on the marble floors. I stood at the massive double doors for longer than I should have, the chill of the London air crawling down my spine. I could hear my mother's voice in my head, sharp and scolding. "Don't loiter, Octavia. It makes you look indecisive." "Octavia," my mother said, her smile slicing through the room like a scalpel. "So glad you could grace us with your presence. I came straight from work." My voice sounded small, even to me. I hated that. Patrick's eyes narrowed. "Work? Or your little hobby?" My jaw tightened. "My legal practice is not a hobby." "Oh, darling, don't pretend," my father drawled, swirling his scotch. "You take on charity cases. You know what that looks like? It looks like weakness. And tonight is proof. Proof." The word rattled around in my head. Proof of what? I sank into the last empty armchair, its frame rigid against my back. I felt like prey surrounded by predators too bored to hunt anything else. "Why don't you just say what you came here to say?" I asked, folding my hands so they wouldn't tremble. "It's late." Patrick was the one who leaned forward first. "It's about the trust, Octavia. The accounts, the properties." My heart stuttered. "What about them?" My mother sighed, exasperated, as if I were a dim child. "You know what about. The debts, the press, the investors pulling out, and your associations." I laughed, though it sounded hollow. "My associations?" Patrick pulled out a folder and dropped it on the coffee table. Photos spilled out, some grainy, some sharp, all unmistakable. Me outside a courthouse. Me in a cafe with one of my clients, Tariq, an asylum seeker whose case I'd fought for until my voice went hoarse. Me standing beside protesters at a housing rally, holding a sign. "This is what you do with the Morrigan name?" Patrick hissed. "This is what you tie us to? Criminals and beggars?" I looked at the photos. They felt like shards of myself thrown back in my face. They're people. People we've left behind while we sit here pretending we're untouchable. "You're bleeding us dry," my father barked, his face flushing red. "Your clients cost money. They bring bad press. The board doesn't want you involved anymore." "You're acting like this is my fault," I shot back. "I didn't gamble away our investments. I didn't funnel money into half-baked ventures. That was Patrick's bright idea." Patrick lurched up, jabbing a finger at me. "Watch it, Octavia. We're all on the line because of you. And if you'd just played your role, married well, shut up, and smiled for the cameras, we wouldn't be here." My mother's voice sliced through his rage. "Enough. This is a family matter, not a street fight." She turned to me, her eyes narrowing. Octavia, you will sign over your shares. Effective immediately. My breath left me like I'd been punched. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm dead serious, she said, voice dripping with venom. You're the reason the Morrigan name is in the papers. You're the reason we're bleeding money. You will sign them over, and you will disappear for a while. Maybe somewhere no one knows your name. I could taste iron on my tongue from biting the inside of my cheek. No, absolutely not. My father slammed his glass on the table, shards of ice jumping out. You think you have a choice? Patrick sneered. We have your signatures on enough paperwork to tie you up for years. Or, you can do this our way and walk away clean. I looked around the room at the people who had once been my whole world. Their faces were masks. Pitiless, hungry. I felt something inside me crack. But before I could speak, the drawing room door creaked open. A voice, calm and clear, cut through the storm. Actually, Octavia does have a choice. All heads snapped toward the door. There stood Claudia Halliday, my lawyer, my friend, the one person who'd stayed when the vultures circled. Her suit was immaculate, her eyes sharp enough to cut diamonds. She stepped forward, setting her briefcase on the table, covering the damning photos with a decisive click. If you'd all bothered to read the family trust documents, you'd know she can't be forced out without a unanimous vote. And I see one vote in this room that doesn't belong to you. Patrick's face went pale. My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. My mother's lips twitched, but the rage behind her eyes told me this wasn't over. I met Claudia's gaze. For the first time that night, my heartbeat steadied. I sat a little taller, my voice unshaking. Thank you for coming, Claudia. She glanced around the room, her eyes daring any of them to speak. Let's continue this discussion, shall we? I looked at my family. These people who would rather bury me than watch me rise. And for the first time, I felt something spark in my chest. Not fear, not shame. Fight. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Silence has a texture when it drapes itself over a room like this. Claudia's words were still echoing through my mind as I watched my family recalibrate around the sudden realization that I was not as cornered as they'd hoped. My mother's fingers drummed against her wine glass, her eyes never leaving Claudia's face. Patrick was pacing now, a caged animal suddenly aware the bars were loose. My father leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the scotch forgotten on the table. The photographs of me lay hidden beneath Claudia's briefcase, but their weight pressed on all of us. Claudia pulled out a folder from her case and laid it out like a dealer at a high-stakes poker table. Her voice was calm, crisp, each word a blade. Malcolm, Celeste, Patrick. You know full well the Morrigan Family Trust stipulates that any transfer of shares requires the consent of every adult beneficiary. Octavia is a signatory. Without her agreement, you're powerless to strip her out. If you attempt to do so, we'll see you in court. And you won't like what comes out in discovery. My father scoffed, but the vein in his temple pulsed. You think we're afraid of some mudslinging, Claudia? She met his gaze, unblinking. You should be. I've been gathering documents for months. Octavia's charitable work is the least of your worries. Embezzlement, fraudulent investment vehicles, hidden offshore accounts. Shall I keep going? Patrick stopped pacing. You can't prove any of that. Oh, but I can, Claudia said, her smile cold. And if you think the press loves a fallen angel, they adore a scandal involving an entire dynasty devouring its own. The words should have terrified me, but instead they pulsed through my veins like a shot of adrenaline. For so long, I'd thought I had to protect them, that my loyalty was my penance for being the daughter they never wanted. But now, seeing Claudia stand there, unwavering, I realized I'd been shielding monsters. Octavia, my mother said suddenly, her voice dripping honey over the acid beneath. Darling, none of this has to be so dramatic. We're family. We can find a solution that keeps everyone whole. Just sign the papers. Give up your shares for a generous settlement. You can move somewhere quiet. Start fresh. No more of this embarrassment. I looked at her. Really looked. The perfect chignon, the pearls at her throat, the lips painted red like a threat. For years I'd swallowed my anger, convinced myself she acted out of love. But love doesn't come with conditions that strangle you. No, I said, my voice cutting the silence like glass. You don't get to decide who I am anymore. Patrick's laugh barked out, sharp and ugly. You think you're strong enough to fight us? The Morrigan name is worth more than your scrappy ideals. We built this city. The courts, the police, the press. They all owe us favors. Claudia stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. You'd be surprised how quickly those favors disappear when the headlines scream fraud and family implodes. I felt a surge of gratitude for her, but also a flicker of dread. Claudia was right, but I knew my family better than she did. They didn't lose. Not without drawing blood. My father spoke next, his voice low, measured. Octavia, you walk out of this house tonight without signing. You're declaring war on us, on your own blood. I'm not declaring war, I said, standing up. My legs trembled, but my spine was steel. I'm refusing to be your scapegoat. My mother's mask cracked for just a heartbeat. A flash of real rage, real fear. But then it smoothed over, as if it had never existed. You'll regret this. Claudia closed her folder with a snap. And you'll regret underestimating her. We walked out together, the weight of the family portraits pressing against my back like eyes that would follow me forever. The night air slapped my face, sharp and alive with the possibility of something better than this poison masquerading as love. We didn't speak as we crossed the courtyard, my heels crunching on the gravel. When we reached her car, Claudia turned to me. You did well in there, she said softly. I feel like I'm about to vomit. She smiled, that rare, genuine smile I'd come to trust more than anything. That means you're doing something brave. I slid into the passenger seat, staring back at the Morrigan house. Its grand windows glowed like the eyes of a predator, watching, waiting. I knew they wouldn't back down. But neither would I. That night, in my tiny flat, I sat at the kitchen table with Claudia's folder spread out in front of me. Bank statements, shell company ledgers, private emails, a labyrinth of corruption that tied my family together like a knot of vipers. Every page I turned, another illusion died. At 3 a.m, I stopped. I pressed my palms to my face, fighting the swell of grief and rage that threatened to drown me. For the first time, I allowed myself to whisper the truth I'd never dared to say aloud. They've always hated me. The words tasted bitter, but honest. They were the key to my freedom. If they hated me, I owed them nothing. Not my loyalty. Not my silence. When dawn bled pale light into my flat, I made my decision. Claudia was right. They would bury me if I gave them the chance. So I wouldn't give them any chance at all. Detective Caldwell? It's Octavia Morrigan. I want to talk. The pause that followed was heavy, crackling with unspoken questions. Finally his voice, low and careful. Is this about your family? Yes, I whispered. It's about everything. By the time I hung up, my hands were trembling so badly, I had to grip the table to steady myself. I knew what I was doing. Inviting ruin, inviting danger. But for the first time in my life, I felt awake. Days blurred into each other. Claudia and I met in hidden corners of cafes and abandoned conference rooms after hours. Caldwell came in quietly, his notebook always half full, his eyes always darting over his shoulder. We laid out the pieces, the hush money payments, the rigged contracts, the ghost accounts. Every revelation was a step deeper into the dark. Every step made it impossible to turn back. One night, after hours of scribbled notes and hushed strategy, Claudia looked at me, her expression guarded. You know they won't just let this go. They'll come for you. For us. I nodded. My voice was a rasp. Let them come. The storm came sooner than I thought. It started with the calls, unknown numbers, heavy breathing, then silence. Then the photos slipped under my door. Shots of me at my office, of Claudia leaving her flat, of Caldwell outside the precinct. When I found the dead bird on my balcony, its neck twisted, a scrap of paper tied to its leg with my name scrawled in block letters, I knew. This was their love letter. Their promise that they would not go down easily. I called Claudia that night. "Do we stop?" I asked, my voice raw. "No," she said without hesitation. "We double down." So we did. The three of us became conspirators in truth, digging up decades of rot the Morrigan name had buried in marble and charity galas. And as we dug, I felt something bloom inside me. Not just fight, but a belief that I could win. But just as we prepared to go public, Caldwell didn't show for a meeting. His phone rang and rang. The next day, Claudia and I stood in the cold drizzle outside a crime scene, tape fluttering in the wind like a flag of surrender. Caldwell was gone. Claudia's hand found mine, squeezing hard enough to hurt. "This is them," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "This is your family." I swallowed the sob clawing up my throat. Not anymore. The storm was here, and I was done running from it. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. I didn't sleep the night Caldwell died. I sat in my living room, the only light coming from the street lamps slicing through my blinds, and I waited for the knock I knew would come. The Morrigans didn't like mess. They liked control. And Caldwell's death was a message spelled out in blood. Stay silent, or you're next. Claudia stayed with me that night, sitting cross-legged on the floor opposite me, a mug of tea going cold between her hands. Neither of us spoke much. What was there to say? A good man was dead because he chose to stand beside me. Dawn came, pale and mocking. Claudia's phone buzzed. A single text. She read it, her face hardening. "It's worse than we thought," she said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "The coroner's calling it an accident. No investigation." I laughed, bitter and sharp. Of course they are. I wanted to smash something, to scream, but I couldn't afford that. Rage would have to wait. We were in this too deep to let grief slow us down. By mid-morning, we were back at Claudia's office, a hidden space above a tailor's shop in Holborn. It smelled of dust and old books, but it was safe, or at least safer than my flat. I sat cross-legged on her worn leather sofa while she spread out new documents on the table. Caldwell's files, his insurance policy, his handwritten notes. "Look at this." She pointed to a line Caldwell had scribbled in his neat block letters. "Trustee transfer pending. Check Cayman accounts." I leaned forward. "You think they moved the money?" Claudia shook her head. "No. I think they're trying to bury it before we find it. But Caldwell got this close." I closed my eyes. I could see him, pen tapping his notebook, eyes scanning the ledgers late at night when everyone else had gone home. He'd died for this trail. I wouldn't let that be in vain. I reached for my phone. Claudia's hand stopped me. "Octavia, think. Who are you calling?" "A journalist. Someone I trust." "Who?" I hesitated. Names flickered through my mind like burnt-out lights. Who could I trust when my family's influence ran through the veins of this city like poison? I thought of one name, someone I hadn't spoken to in years but who had once been the only person who told me the truth when it hurt. "Felix Armitage," I said finally. Claudia raised an eyebrow. "Felix Armitage? The financial reporter who broke the Newbridge bank fraud?" I nodded. "He hates my family almost as much as I do. If there's a way to get this into the light, he'll find it." She didn't argue. She just slid my phone back to me. "Then call him. But do it from a burner. And meet him somewhere public. Somewhere they can't get to you easily." I did exactly that. 2 hours later, I sat on a battered bench in Hyde Park, my coat pulled tight against the drizzle. Felix appeared like a ghost out of the fog, his camera bag slung across his shoulder, eyes hidden behind round glasses that made him look younger than he was. "Octavia Morrigan," he said, his voice low, tinged with that perpetual note of cynicism. "Haven't seen you since that fundraiser at Claridge's. You wore red and made your mother look like wallpaper. How's the dynasty?" I barked a laugh that startled a passing jogger. "Rotting from the inside out. That's why I called you." Felix sat beside me, crossing one leg over the other. "So? Spill." I pulled out a folder from my bag, the same one Claudia and I had gone over until our eyes blurred. I handed it to him, my fingers trembling as they brushed his. "They killed Caldwell." His eyebrows shot up. "That detective you used to date? The one who got busted down for pushing too hard on a Morrigan fraud case?" "Yes. He was helping me. Now he's gone. They'll come for me next, unless we make this too public to hide." Felix flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning, lips moving silently. When he looked up, his grin was sharp as a knife. "God, I love when your family screws up. They always think money can buy silence. It usually does." He shut the folder, tucking it into his bag. "Not this time. I'll need corroboration, bank statements, emails, someone willing to go on record." "Claudia and I have it all. And I'll go on record. It's the only way." Felix's eyes softened for a heartbeat. "You know they'll gut you for this. They'll dig up every scrap of dirt they can find. They'll paint you as unstable, bitter, a liar." "Let them." I looked out over the gray lake, the swans drifting across like ghosts. "If I'm going down, I'm taking every lie with me." Felix squeezed my shoulder. "Brave girl, text me a drop point for the files. I'll be ready." I walked away from Hyde Park, feeling like my bones were made of glass, but my spine was still straight. I knew what was coming. Claudia and I doubled our security, moved our meetings to new cafes every day. Felix worked in the shadows, dropping hints in his columns, tiny hooks baiting the press while we built our case. But the Morrigans struck back faster than I'd braced for. The first blow landed when my landlord called. The flat was being seized for unpaid taxes. Taxes I knew I'd paid. Claudia's office was broken into. They stole nothing, just scattered our files and left a single photo taped to her computer. It was of me and her, walking out of a courthouse, red circles drawn around our heads like targets. "Keep going?" Claudia asked me that night, her voice tight, her hand trembling around her glass of wine. I looked at the photo. Yes, keep going. The next week, the papers ran stories about me. Wild rumors about drug use, affairs, embezzlement. A mugshot of someone who looked like me but wasn't, plastered across the tabloids with my name in bold. My phone buzzed nonstop with old friends asking if it was true. It felt like drowning under lies, but I stayed afloat by sheer force of will. Felix sent a message. "They're rattled. They're sloppy. We're close." Close wasn't close enough. One night, I came home to find my door ajar. The flat was cold, too cold. Claudia had warned me to always call her before going in, but I didn't listen. I stepped inside. The air smelled metallic, like pennies on my tongue, and then I saw it. My cat, Piper, lay on the sofa, her fur matted with blood. I dropped to my knees, a scream lodged in my throat. She was gone. The only creature who'd ever loved me unconditionally, snuffed out like an inconvenience. The police were useless. I didn't even bother filing a report. I knew who did it. I knew why. I buried Piper in the tiny garden behind Claudia's office. We stood in the drizzle, the earth clinging to my fingernails as I covered that small grave. Claudia put a hand on my shoulder, her voice hoarse. "You can still run. You can still get on a plane, disappear. I'll handle the rest." I looked up at her, rain and tears mixing on my cheeks. "No, they don't get to win." The next morning, I called Felix. "Release everything," I told him. "All of it. If I die, I want the world to see them for what they are." And that's when the knock came. 3 sharp raps on Claudia's office door. I froze. Claudia reached for the drawer where she kept the revolver she'd bought 2 weeks ago. "Stay behind me," she whispered. But the voice on the other side was one I knew too well. Silk over steel, charming and poisonous. Octavia, dear sister, open the door. We need to talk. Patrick. I stepped forward, Claudia's hand a vice on my arm. Octavia, don't. I shrugged her off. I have to. I opened the door. Patrick stood there, rain dripping off his tailored coat. A grin that didn't reach his eyes stretching his face. He looked at me like he always had, like a problem he could solve with enough force. May I come in? He asked. Claudia's gun clicked as she flicked off the safety. Try it. Patrick raised his hands in mock surrender. Relax, counselor. I'm not here to hurt her, not yet. I met his eyes, forcing my knees to lock, my voice steady. What do you want? His grin widened. I came to give you one last chance, sister. One signature, one plane ticket. You walk away with your life. I laughed, a sound that felt foreign in my raw throat. My life? You mean the scraps you leave me? Patrick leaned in, his breath hot on my cheek. Better scraps than 6 feet under, Tavia. I didn't flinch. Not this time. Go to hell, Patrick. His eyes flicked to Claudia. I tried to be nice. He turned and walked back into the storm, his silhouette swallowed by the dark. And I knew then, the real fight was just beginning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Patrick's footsteps were still echoing in my mind, long after he'd vanished into the storm. Claudia locked the door behind him, her knuckles white around the gun. I watched her shoulders drop, a shiver running through her when the lock clicked into place. She turned to me. He'll come back. They all will. You know that, don't you? I nodded, though my insides felt hollow, scraped raw by fear and fury. Let them come, I whispered. We're not backing down now. Claudia sighed and tucked the revolver back into her drawer. Her eyes found mine, searching for any sign of weakness she could patch up before it bled too much. We need more than Felix's articles. We need to show them the smoking gun, the offshore accounts, the forged signatures, something undeniable. I sank into the battered armchair by the window, staring out at the rain-soaked street. My reflection in the glass looked like a ghost, my skin pale, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. I thought of Caldwell, of Piper, of every line I'd let them cross until they reached my throat. No more mercy, I said. No more secrets. Dash, 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 dot, dot. We spent the next week living like fugitives. Claudia and I hopped between cheap hotels and safe houses borrowed from her old clients. People she'd defended when the world spat them out. People who owed her nothing but gave her everything. It was strange, finding protection in those who had so little to give. Felix kept feeding us information through burner phones. Updates on the articles. Tips about who was leaking rumors to the tabloids. He'd become a shadow in their world, weaving his way through boardrooms and back alleys to drag the truth into daylight. One night, we were holed up in a dingy flat above an abandoned shop in Camden. The rain leaked through the ceiling in soft plinks that matched the tremor of my heartbeat. Claudia spread out our notes on the kitchen table. Documents, photos, receipts we'd salvaged before the break-in. Here, she said, tapping a photocopy of an old ledger. This signature, it's your father's name, but look at the flourish on the M. It's not his hand. I leaned in, squinting at the faded ink. It was true. I'd spent enough of my childhood forging his signature on school forms to know the difference. Patrick, I breathed. He's been moving money under Dad's name. Claudia's eyes glittered. If we can tie this to the Cayman accounts Caldwell found, it'll prove fraud. They'll eat each other alive trying to pin the blame elsewhere. For the first time in days, a tremor of hope fluttered in my chest. Where do we start? She glanced at me, her mouth a hard line. We need someone on the inside. Someone who knows the passwords, the shell companies, the account numbers. And they have to trust you more than they fear your brother. My mind spun through every name, every servant, every assistant who'd ever worked for the Morgans. Then one face surfaced. An unlikely ally, but maybe the only one. Claudia, what about Eleanor? Her brow furrowed. Your old nanny? She's more than that. She kept every secret I ever whispered. She's the reason I survived childhood. Patrick fired her years ago because she caught him stealing from the trust. If she still has her old records. Claudia's eyes lit up with cautious hope. Where is she now? I think she's still in Bristol. Running a tiny band B. She's off the grid. Patrick thinks she's harmless. Claudia's fingers drummed the table. Then she's our chance. I found Eleanor 3 days later, tucked behind the ivy-choked walls of a crumbling Victorian terrace. When she opened the door, I nearly broke, because for a heartbeat, I was 8 years old again, sobbing into her apron when my mother locked me in the cellar for losing a necklace. "Octavia Morrigan," she said, her voice warm and brittle all at once. "Look at you. Come in, child." She made me tea like she always had, milky and sweet, the cup warming my frozen fingers. Claudia sat beside me, every inch the lawyer, but her eyes softened when Eleanor took my hands. "I know why you're here," Eleanor said, before I could speak. "I've been waiting for this day." I blinked at her. "You have?" She smiled, the lines around her eyes deepening. "You were always the brave one, Tavia. I kept everything. Every bank statement I found crumpled in Patrick's pockets, every letter your father tried to hide. They thought I was just the help. They forgot the help sees everything." She led us to a back room. Dusty, cramped, lined with cardboard boxes stacked to the ceiling. She pulled one down, its corners frayed and stained with time. Inside were notebooks, scraps of receipts, grainy photos of Patrick slipping envelopes to men I didn't recognize. Eleanor sank onto the floor, cross-legged like she was telling me a bedtime story. I couldn't stop them. But I could keep the proof. Claudia knelt beside her, already snapping photos of each page. "This is everything we need," she murmured. "It connects Patrick directly to the offshore accounts. It shows he forged your father's signature on loan guarantees. It's enough to bury him." I sat on the threadbare carpet, my heart thudding against my ribs. "He'll come for you, Eleanor, if he finds out you helped me." She laughed, a dry sound that cut through my fear. "Let him try. I'm old, I'm broke, and I'm not afraid of him anymore. But you," she cupped my face in her soft hands, "you make sure they never hurt another child the way they hurt you." I pressed my forehead to hers, letting the warmth of her smell, lavender and tea, anchor me in a world that wanted me adrift. When we left Bristol, we drove in silence, Eleanor's box of evidence wedged between Claudia's boots and the front seat. The rain blurred the world outside the windshield, but for once, it didn't feel like it was closing in. Back in London, Felix met us in a dimly lit pub, the kind that smelled like spilled beer and old secrets. He flipped through Eleanor's files, whistling low under his breath. "You did it, Tavia," he said. "This is the nail in the coffin. Once this hits, there's no PR spin in the world that can save the Morrigans." But his grin faltered when he looked up at me. "You know they'll burn you alive for this, right? They'll drag you through the mud, dig up every mistake you've ever made." I sipped my watery gin and tonic. "They already killed Caldwell. They killed my cat. They won't stop, so neither will I." Felix lifted his glass to me. "To the last Morrigan standing." I didn't feel like the last anything. I felt like the first drop in a storm that might finally wash my family's sins away. It took 2 days to coordinate the release. Felix's editor demanded hard proof, multiple sources. Claudia worked around the clock, cross-referencing account numbers, drafting legal shields to keep me from disappearing into a black site or a mental ward, old Morrigan family tricks. When the article finally dropped, it was like watching a match hit gasoline. The Morrigan Dynasty, a house of cards. By dusk, every news channel had my face on screen. Commentators argued over whether I was a hero or a traitor. Strangers sent me flowers, hate mail, death threats. Reporters camped outside every door I'd ever walked through. Claudia stayed by my side, her hand always hovering near the gun hidden in her bag. Felix called hourly with updates, some promising, some terrifying. Patrick went underground, My parents fled to their country estate, but the press found them anyway. One night, Claudia and I watched the news in a cheap hotel room, the smell of burnt toast lingering from a dinner we'd abandoned on the hot plate. The anchor's voice was gleeful. New evidence suggests Patrick Morgan forged millions in loans, implicating senior members of the Morgan board. Claudia switched off the TV. They'll try to buy someone to make this go away. They always do. I turned to her. Then we find more. We make it too big to hide. She smiled, exhausted but fierce. I've waited my whole career for a client like you. Before I could reply, a knock echoed through the cheap plywood door. Not 3 sharp raps this time. This knock was softer, hesitant. Claudia grabbed the gun. I grabbed her wrist. Wait. I peered through the peephole and my breath caught in my throat. Standing there, hair plastered to her forehead by the rain, was my mother, Celeste Morgan. She looked small, diminished. A ghost of the woman who'd once ruled our home with a diamond fist. I opened the door just enough to meet her eyes. What do you want? Her voice was a whisper. I need your help, Octavia. And for the first time, I saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't here to threaten me. She was running, too. I stepped back, the door yawning open like the mouth of a beast about to swallow us all. The storm wasn't over. It was just changing shape. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. When the article finally dropped, it was like watching a match hit gasoline. The Morgan Dynasty, a house of cards. By dusk, every news channel had my face on screen. Commentators argued over whether I was a hero or a traitor. Strangers sent me flowers, hate mail, death threats. Reporters camped outside every door I'd ever walked through. Claudia stayed by my side, her hand always hovering near the gun hidden in her bag. Felix called hourly with updates, some promising, some terrifying. Patrick went underground. My parents fled to their country estate, but the press found them anyway. One night, Claudia and I watched the news in a cheap hotel room, the smell of burnt toast lingering from a dinner we'd abandoned on the hot plate. The anchor's voice was gleeful. New evidence suggests Patrick Morgan forged millions in loans, implicating senior members of the Morgan board. Claudia switched off the TV. They'll try to buy someone to make this go away. They always do. I turned to her. Then we find more. We make it too big to hide. She smiled, exhausted but fierce. I've waited my whole career for a client like you. Before I could reply, a knock echoed through the cheap plywood door. Not 3 sharp raps this time. This knock was softer, hesitant. Claudia grabbed the gun. I grabbed her wrist. Wait. I peered through the peephole and my breath caught in my throat. Standing there, hair plastered to her forehead by the rain, was my mother, Celeste Morgan. She looked small, diminished. A ghost of the woman who'd once ruled our home with a diamond fist. I opened the door just enough to meet her eyes. What do you want? Her voice was a whisper. I need your help, Octavia. And for the first time, I saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't here to threaten me. She was running, too. I stepped back, the door yawning open like the mouth of a beast about to swallow us all. The storm wasn't over. It was just changing shape. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Celeste Morgan was not a woman I ever imagined would come to me for anything. For most of my life, she'd been an ice sculpture carved in the shape of a mother, beautiful, cold, fragile, only in the places where it could cut you to the bone. But that night, standing in the flickering hallway light of a cheap hotel, she looked human in a way that terrified me. She crossed the threshold like a ghost escaping a burning house. Claudia watched her like a hawk, her hand never straying far from the revolver on the side table. Celeste's eyes flicked to Claudia, then back to me, as if she could sense who the real threat was now. "Sit down," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone older, someone who'd stopped waiting for apologies. She perched on the end of the scratchy motel bedspread, the scent of her expensive perfume oddly out of place in this dingy room. Claudia stood behind me, arms folded. "Say what you came to say, Celeste." My mother's hands trembled as she reached into her coat pocket, pulling out an envelope, creased at the corners like she'd been clutching it for hours. She placed it on the nightstand, pushing it toward me. "What's this?" I asked, not reaching for it. "Insurance," she said, her voice thin. "Your father. Malcolm's preparing to disappear. Offshore. He'll let Patrick take the fall publicly, but they'll both be gone within days. The accounts are already moving. He thinks I don't know, but I've kept copies. Passcodes, safe deposit boxes, the names they've used." My pulse roared in my ears. Claudia moved first, flipping through the envelope's contents. Bank printouts, handwritten notes, passport copies. The weight of it made my knees weak. "Why give this to me?" I asked. "Why now?" Celeste looked at me, really looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "Because I'm tired. Because I'm old enough now to admit that I should have protected you. That I let them do what they did. To you, to everyone. And because if you don't finish this, it'll all happen again." She closed her eyes. "Your brother has always been Malcolm's favorite. He was the son who would do anything, to keep the empire afloat. And you were always in the way. It should have made me feel triumphant, hearing her confess. It didn't. It made my chest ache with a grief I'd never let myself touch." "You could have stopped him," I said. My voice cracked. "You could have stopped him every time he locked me in that room, every time he told me I was worthless." Celeste opened her eyes, shining with tears she probably hadn't shed in decades. "I know." Silence devoured the room. Claudia broke it, snapping her fingers in front of me. "Octavia, we need to move. If your father's going underground, we have maybe 48 hours to intercept those accounts. If this is real, we can freeze the assets, file injunctions, put out red notices. Make it impossible for them to hide." Celeste let out a tiny broken laugh. "Impossible? Malcolm always finds a way." "Not this time," I said, my resolve sharpening like a blade. I grabbed the envelope, pressing it flat on the table. "We need Felix. We need the financial task force. And we need to make it public. So public they can't shut it down." Claudia was already dialing. "I'll pull in the forensic accountant I used on the Barrow case. He's a ghost when he wants to be. He'll track the wire transfers in real time." Celeste pulled her knees up onto the bed, hugging them like a child. "What will happen to me?" I looked at her. This brittle, shivering woman who'd let monsters shape my childhood. I wanted to hate her, but hate was too heavy. I had a war to win. "You'll testify," I said flatly. "And then you'll live with it." She nodded once, her chin trembling. "All right. ... The next 24 hours were a fever dream of phone calls, back-channel meetings, encrypted files zipped and forwarded through servers Claudia swore couldn't be traced. Felix operated like a shark, circling lawyers and politicians, threatening to release the worst of what we had if they so much as thought about burying the story. By nightfall, the task force was in place, freeze orders drafted, warrants waiting for signatures. Claudia and I barely slept, our bodies running on stale coffee and adrenaline. At dawn, I found Celeste asleep on the sofa, her designer coat draped over her shoulders like a shroud. I stood over her, trying to find the ghost of the mother I'd wanted her to be. But all I saw was a woman who'd survived too long in a gilded cage she helped build. Claudia came up behind me, whispering, "If she hadn't flipped, they might have gotten away." "I know," I murmured. "Doesn't make it better. It doesn't have to." I turned to her, our eyes locking. "When this is over, I'm done. I want to build something real. Something that doesn't have the Morrigan name stamped on its bones." Claudia's lips "Then you will. ... When the raids hit, they hit like thunder. Felix's article went live at 6 in the morning. By 7, unmarked vans rolled through the gates of the Morrigan estate. Drones hovered over the country house as police hauled out boxes of records. The press was there before breakfast was finished, cameras catching every priceless painting and marble bust carried out as evidence. Patrick was cornered first, tracked to a private airfield trying to board a jet bound for the Caribbean. He fought, of course he did, screaming that it was all my fault, that I'd ruined him. The photos of his arrest hit the news before he even touched a holding cell. Malcolm was slipperier. He vanished for almost a day, slipping through back alleys and luxury flats bought under fake names. But the paper trail was too thick, the money too dirty. When they dragged him out of an old family apartment in Mayfair, he was drunk, wearing the same suit from the emergency meeting months ago. The same suit he'd worn when he'd called me worthless. I watched the live feed on Felix's laptop, Claudia's hand in mine. I should have felt relief, or triumph, or vindication. But all I felt was tired. When she finished, she turned to me. Her eyes were dry, but her shoulders trembled. "Am I free now?" I stared at her, the question echoing inside my ribcage. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I am. .. The aftermath felt like swimming through oil, slow, suffocating, sticky with betrayal. The Morrigan name burned down in the tabloids and talk shows. Board members jumped ship. Family loyalists flipped for lighter sentences. Patrick's face plastered the evening news. Each charge read out like a funeral bell. Felix's inbox overflowed with tips, stories, new angles. Claudia fielded legal threats daily, but each one crumbled under the weight of the evidence we'd dragged into the sun. One night we sat on the rooftop of Claudia's new office, a tiny place above a charity legal clinic. The air was warm for once, the sky a bruised purple. I leaned back in a rickety chair, sipping warm cider, as Felix read aloud the latest headline: "Morrigan Empire in Ruins, as Whistleblower Testifies." "I hate that word," I muttered. "Whistleblower. It sounds like I betrayed them. But they betrayed me first." Felix raised his glass. "To traitors, then." Claudia laughed, a sound that loosened something inside my chest. "To the ones who survive betrayal and make it count." We toasted under the stars, our glasses clinking like distant bells. And for the first time in my life, I felt the leash of the Morrigan name slip from my throat. .. Weeks later, I stood at Caldwell's grave, the wind whipping my hair into my eyes. I placed a single white lily on the fresh soil, my fingers lingering on the cold granite. "I did it," I whispered. "We did it. I wish you were here to see it." I closed my eyes, letting the tears come, not out of regret, but release. Behind me, I felt Claudia's presence, solid and unwavering. When I turned, she was smiling, her hand extended. "Ready to go home?" I took her hand. "Let's go build one." This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. When you dismantle a dynasty, nobody warns you about the quiet that comes afterward. It was as if all the noise that had filled my head for decades, the threats, the guilt, the whispered barbs over candlelit dinners, was suddenly gone, leaving behind a silence so complete it rang in my ears. The day after my family's empire officially fell, I woke up in Claudia's tiny guest room. Sunlight spilled across the blankets, and for a moment I didn't know who I was. No meetings, no strategy sessions, no secret recordings, no shadows under every door. Just me. I lay there listening to the city wake up. The distant hum of buses, the bark of a dog, the clang of someone dragging their bins to the curb. Normal sounds. A normal life. Something I'd never believed I could have. When I finally forced myself out of bed, I found Claudia at her kitchen table, already on her third cup of coffee. She glanced up at me, her eyes soft. "You slept in." "Good." I sank into the chair opposite her, pulling my knees to my chest like I used to when I was a child hiding from my father's thunder. But there was no thunder now, only Claudia's steady breathing and the creak of the chair as she reached for my hand. "You did it, Tavia. I know. But the words felt foreign on my tongue. Victory was not what I thought it would be. It wasn't a fireworks display or a parade. It was this: the hollow aftermath, the ache of freedom pressing against old scars. ... The days blurred. Felix's articles kept rolling out, each one another nail in the coffin of the Morgan legacy. Patrick was remanded without bail. My father's assets were frozen. Celeste vanished into a quiet witness protection program in the country. A mercy I wasn't sure she deserved but couldn't bring myself to deny. I tried to stay out of the spotlight, but it followed me like a stubborn ghost. Whistleblower. Heir-turned traitor. Every headline turned my name into a symbol of either hope or betrayal, depending on which paper you read. Claudia protected me from most of it. She filtered calls, handled the vultures circling with book deals and TV interviews. But even she couldn't shield me from the thing I hadn't expected: the silence inside my own head. I found myself wandering the city at night, my footsteps tracing old routes. The courthouse where I'd sat for hours beside clients no one else would defend. The cafe where Claudia and I first hatched our plan. The charity office where I'd once dreamed of building something good. One evening, I found myself on the steps of that old community center. The paint was peeling, the sign half hanging by rusted screws. But it was open, warm light spilling out into the cold. Inside, a young woman with kind eyes recognized me immediately. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask for a selfie or shove a microphone in my face. She just handed me a cup of tea and pointed me toward a circle of folding chairs. "Stay as long as you like," she said. I sat there for hours, listening to people talk about lost jobs, evictions, unfair landlords. The problems I'd fought for in the shadows now laid bare in a cold room with peeling linoleum. And I realized I wasn't finished. Not yet. ... I told Claudia my plan the next morning over burnt toast and black coffee. I want to use the settlement money, not just to start over, to start something new. She raised an eyebrow. "Octavia, you don't owe the world every piece of you." "I know, but maybe I owe it the best pieces." I watched her shoulders relax as she leaned back, a proud smile tugging at her lips. "What did you have in mind?" So I told her. A legal clinic for people like Tariq, who couldn't afford the predators in £1,000 suits. A halfway house for girls running from families like mine. Microloans for women who wanted to leave men like my father. Small, I said. Local. Real. Claudia's eyes glistened as she lifted her mug and a toast. To real. The paperwork was a nightmare. The press latched onto every step. Headlines spinning my plans into fairy tales or scams, depending on the day. But I didn't care. For the first time in my life, the noise didn't drown me. It motivated me. Felix stayed in touch, feeding me contacts, lawyers, accountants who hadn't been bought by the Morgan name. He even turned up one night with 2 battered filing cabinets of confidential files, evidence of landlords who'd colluded with my father, slumlords who'd kept entire blocks in squalor while funneling money into trust accounts. "Use it," he said simply. "Finish what you started." And so I did. ... I called it the Piper Project, named for the little cat whose tiny grave still bloomed wildflowers behind Claudia's office. A reminder that no fight is too small, that no love is wasted. We opened in a basement with peeling paint and too many leaks to count. But we opened. Women came first. Some bruised, some broken, all looking for a door they could close behind them without fear. Then families, single fathers, runaway teens. Each story folded into mine like a patchwork quilt. I didn't know I'd been sewing all my life. Claudia stayed on as our lead counsel, splitting her time between pro bono cases and mentoring the young lawyers I took on. Some days we fought eviction notices and petty fines. Other days we pushed class actions against developers who'd once lined my father's pockets. It was messy. It was exhausting. It was beautiful. ... One rainy afternoon, I sat in my tiny office, the sound of chatter and clinking tea mugs drifting in from the common room. I was reading a letter, handwritten, thick with crossed out lines. From a girl named Sanvi who'd escaped her father's abuse with our help. You said no one could bury my story if I didn't let them. You were right. I pressed the letter to my chest, my eyes closing. Outside my cracked window, London was gray and cold. But inside, the warmth spread through my bones like sunlight I'd never been allowed to feel. Claudia knocked on the door, her hair wild from the drizzle. She dropped a stack of files on my desk and grinned. They're at it again. A developer trying to evict 20 families in Shoreditch. You up for it? I laughed, the sound startling and real in my throat. Always. We fought, and we kept fighting. And every victory, no matter how small, stitched another wound closed in my soul. Some nights, when the building was empty and my tea had gone cold, I'd sit in that cramped office and talk to Caldwell, to Piper, to the versions of myself I'd buried under the Morrigan name. I'd tell them about the women who got restraining orders, the families who kept their homes, the girls who walked in with nothing but a backpack and left with their heads high. I'd tell them I was tired, but I was whole. And that was enough. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. I didn't expect peace to feel so loud. When the Morrigan name finally sank into scandal, and the Piper Project began to root itself into the cracks my family left behind, I thought the ghosts would fade. But they didn't. They just changed their shape. I saw them in the marble columns of the old courthouse, where I sat one morning waiting to give a statement in yet another case linked to the fallout. They were there in the walls, in the way the clerk flinched when he said my name. My reputation might have been washed clean by headlines, but to some people, I'd always be the woman who tore her own blood to pieces. The hearing dragged for hours. Lawyers bickering over signatures, frozen funds, contested properties, a maze of old money trying to outrun the light. When the gavel finally fell and the judge ruled in our favor, I felt no triumph, just relief. Another piece of my father's empire chipped away, another child's name cleared from fraudulent deeds. Outside the courthouse, the press waited like vultures. I gave them nothing but a nod. Claudia's coat fell over my shoulders as we pushed through the crowd, her voice low in my ear. You don't owe them your pain. I knew she was right. But the pain still lived in the marrow of my bones. That night, I walked the streets alone, my scarf pulled high against the December chill. London's Christmas lights sparkled like cheap jewels. Couples huddled under umbrellas, children squealed at shop windows decked with fake snow. I found myself on a quiet side street, standing in front of an old cafe I used to haunt in my student days. It was mostly the same: cracked tiles, warm cinnamon smell, an old man behind the counter who'd once slipped me free pastries when he saw the bruises I hid beneath my sleeves. Inside, I ordered tea and sat in the corner booth. My reflection in the window looked older than I remembered. A woman with scars she no longer hid, hair streaked with strands that glittered silver under the cafe's dim lights. I pulled out my battered notebook. Not the legal pad I carried for court or the official ledgers I used for the Piper Project. This one was different. A place for thoughts I didn't want to polish into statements or slogans. I wrote, "What do you do when you win?" Then beneath it, "Keep building." I was about to close the cover when I felt someone watching me. Across the room, a teenage girl sat alone, her backpack wedged between her feet, eyes rimmed with the hollow darkness I knew too well. She flinched when I caught her gaze, then dropped her eyes to her cracked phone screen. My feet moved before my mind decided. I slid into the seat opposite her. She looked up, startled. "Hi," I said softly. "You okay?" She didn't answer. Her hands fidgeted on the table. I placed one of the Piper Project cards in front of her. Just a name, a number, an address scrawled on cheap cardstock. "If you ever need somewhere to go, we'll be there." She didn't speak, but she took the card. The next morning I told Claudia about the girl. We were in the Piper Project's basement office, our breath visible in the winter air, because the radiators were older than both of us combined. "Did she say her name?" Claudia asked. "No, but she'll come if she needs to. I know that look. It's the same one I had when I was her age." Claudia poured me tea, her smile gentle. You can't save everyone, Tavia. I shrugged. I know, but I can make sure they know someone will try. Dash 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 dot dot. In January, a fire gutted one of the apartment blocks tied up in my father's fraudulent deeds. 20 families were displaced overnight. Families who should have been protected by the trust funds that Patrick siphoned away for private jets and secret islands. We scrambled. The Piper Project turned every corner of our creaking building into a shelter. Air mattresses in the conference room, soup pots bubbling on hot plates, volunteers ferrying blankets and baby formula at all hours. In the middle of it all, I found myself washing dishes beside Felix, who'd stopped by with crates of donated food. He looked around the chaos, children asleep on beanbags, mothers whispering about job interviews, and grinned. Hell of a legacy, Morrigan. I tossed a dish towel at him. Don't call me that. He laughed, drying a mug. What, you want a new name now? Start fresh? I thought about it. Maybe. Or maybe I just want the Morrigan name to mean something good for once. Dash 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 dot dot. Late one night, after the last child fell asleep in Claudia's old office, I stepped out into the alley behind the building for air. The city was quiet in that eerie way that only happens at 3 in the morning. I looked up at the black sky and said, "Are you watching, Caldwell? Are you seeing this?" A car passed, headlights sweeping across the brick wall like a ghost. I imagined him leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, that half smile on his lips. "You did good, Tavia. You did good. Dash dash dash. Dot dot." By spring, the displaced families had keys to new flats, ones legally theirs, untouchable by old debts and forged signatures. We held a tiny celebration in our drafty main room. The kids drew murals on the walls, flowers, trees, stick figures that looked suspiciously like me and Claudia holding giant keys. One of the mothers pulled me aside afterward, her hands warm on mine. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "I did," I said. "I do. Dash 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 dot dot." Felix was the one who brought me news of Patrick's final sentencing. He found me at the cafe where I'd given that girl my card months ago. She'd never shown up, but I kept leaving a flyer by the register just in case. 7 years, Felix said, sliding into the seat across from me. Embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. No chance of parole for at least 5. I stirred my tea. It won't fix everything he broke. No, Felix said, but it stops him from breaking anything else. We sat there in silence. The cafe hummed around us, spoons clinking, someone laughing near the door, the warmth of strangers who didn't care that I was a Morrigan. Just another woman with shadows under her eyes and hopes stitched into her coat. Felix nudged my notebook across the table. "What's next, Tavia?" I flipped to a blank page. I wrote, "Morstamen." Felix laughed. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." He raised his cup. "To more, then." We toasted under the hum of the old cafe lights, my reflection soft in the window. Not a traitor, not a martyr, not a broken heir, just a woman still standing. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. There's a strange peace in rebuilding when the world believes you should be buried under the rubble. Some days I woke up and half expected to find the old ghosts waiting at the foot of my bed. My father's scorn, Patrick's sneer, my mother's cold hands on my shoulders pushing me back into silence. But the ghosts had no home here. Not anymore. In the year that followed the final Morrigan trials, the Piper Project grew like wildflowers through cracks in concrete. Claudia joked that we were a legal clinic, a halfway house, a food bank, a shelter, all stitched together with stubborn hope and last-minute grants. We were more than that. We were proof that bloodlines didn't get to dictate who you saved or how far you'd go to drag one more soul out of the dark. Dash 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 dot dot. It was a late summer morning when the girl from the cafe finally walked through our battered front door. I was restocking the supply closet, diapers, baby formula, toothpaste, the kinds of things the world takes for granted until you're the one who can't afford them. I heard her voice before I saw her. Small. Unsure. Is Octavia here? I stepped into the hallway, heart hammering like it always did when the past came knocking in unexpected shapes. She looked the same as that rainy night. Same tattered backpack, same tired eyes that never quite met mine. "Hey," I said softly. "You came." She nodded, her fingers twisting the strap of her bag. "You said you'd help." "I did. And I will." I led her to my office. A closet with mismatched chairs and a desk that wobbled if you leaned on it too hard. She sat across from me, knees bouncing. "What's your name?" I asked. She hesitated, like the word might trap her. Then, "Lily." I waited. I'd learned not to rush these confessions. The words always came when they were ready. "My dad, he found where I was staying," she said. "Said if I didn't come home, he's got friends. He always has friends." I felt the old rage rise, bitter and familiar. But my voice was steady. "You're safe here, Lily. No one gets through that door unless you say so." She looked up, her eyes wet but defiant. "You promise?" "I promise. ... Keeping that promise nearly broke me. Her father wasn't just an abusive drunk. He was a landlord with ties to the same crooked web my family once ruled. Eviction threats, fake warrants, shady calls from men who still thought the Morrigan name owed them favors. Claudia stood by me through it all, drafting restraining orders faster than Lily's father could find new loopholes. Felix dug into the man's property holdings, connecting him to slum conditions and illegal rentals. The Piper Project became a fortress, our volunteers sleeping in shifts to make sure no one got in who wasn't welcome. The day Lily finally stood in court, her hand in mine, she testified without flinching. Told the judge about the fists, the locks on the doors, the nights she hid in closets when his friends came around. When the verdict came down, Claudia squeezed my shoulder so tight I felt bruises the next day. Lily's father lost custody, lost properties, lost the power he'd wielded like a cudgel all her life. Afterward, Lily stood at the edge of our tiny garden, her eyes fixed on the wildflowers we'd planted over Piper's grave. "Is this your cat?" she asked. I nodded. She was. "She's everyone's now." Lily smiled, her first real smile. "I'm staying. I want to help." So she did. She helped stock shelves, wash dishes, sit up with new arrivals who couldn't sleep. She found her place in the cracks where I'd once found mine. ... Spring brought new storms. Developers circling like vultures, trying to buy the block where the Piper Project stood. They offered hush money, veiled threats, and when that failed, someone torched our delivery van. I stood in the alley that night, watching the flames lick the sky, Claudia at my side. I could feel the old fear pressing at the base of my skull, that ancient Morrigan voice that whispered, "Stop before they bury you." But I wasn't that girl anymore. "Let them come," I told Claudia. "They'll choke on our ashes." She laughed, brushing soot from my sleeve. "You're terrifying, Tavia. You know that, right?" "Good. ... Felix's exposé on the developer dropped 2 weeks later. Illegal evictions, fraudulent loans, ties to the same offshore accounts Patrick once used. It was like watching old ghosts crawl into the sun to die all over again. When the city council voted to designate the block as a protected community zone, I stood at the back of the crowded chamber, tears slipping down my cheeks. Not for me. For the people who'd stay warm that winter, who'd find clean beds and hot meals where once there was only decay and silence. Claudia found me in the hallway after. She pressed a mug of cheap coffee into my hands, her eyes shining. "You did it again," she whispered. "You always do." I leaned my head on her shoulder. "It's not just me. It's you. It's Felix. It's Lily. It's everyone who stays when the storm hits. That's what family looks like," Claudia said. "Not the one you were born into. The one you build." ... Lily's birthday fell in June. She didn't want presents. Just a dinner in the common room with cheap paper plates and a chocolate cake from the bakery down the street. She sat between me and Claudia, her laughter bouncing off the peeling walls like music. When the candles flickered out, she turned to me. "Can I keep staying here? Even after I turn 18? "Always," I said. "As long as you want," she grinned. "Good. Then maybe someday I'll do what you did." "What's that?" She tilted her head. "Rip out the rot. Plant something new." My throat closed. I pulled her into a hug. Over her shoulder, I saw Claudia watching us. Her eyes soft, her nod telling me what I needed to hear. It was working. The fight was still worth it. ... Some nights, I still felt the old ghosts creep back. My father's voice reminding me that loyalty was worth more than truth. Patrick's sneer when he called me soft. Celeste's perfect smile cracking just before she broke. But they couldn't touch me here. Not in this place built by the hands they'd once tried to break. If you'd told the girl at that emergency family meeting that she'd someday sit at a cracked plastic table, surrounded by the people she chose, I don't think she would have believed you. But I did believe it, and that made all the difference. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you. It was the heat that woke me that morning, a sweltering August day in a city that always felt too damp and gray to hold this much sun. The Piper Project's old pipes rattled in protest. The fans did little more than push hot air from one room to another, but no one complained. We were too busy to care. Every corner of our creaking building pulsed with life. Kids weaving through the hallways with paper crowns and sticky fingers from the charity bake sale, volunteers hauling in boxes of donated clothes, Claudia hunched over a mountain of paperwork that never seemed to shrink. I'd found my rhythm in this chaos. It grounded me. The sound of chatter, the thud of boots by the door, the constant hum of a community that didn't care who I used to be, only who I was willing to show up as now. Felix dropped by that morning, his camera slung over his shoulder like an old friend. He had that grin he wore when he was about to cause trouble. "Morning, Morrigan. Don't call me that." He laughed, waving off my scowl. "Fine. Tavia, then. I need a quote for my next piece. The city's looking at cuts for community funding. Again, if your voice is in it, they'll think twice." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You really think my name still scares them?" Felix's grin faltered just enough to show the truth. "It does. You burned down a dynasty. They know you'll do it again if you have to." I hated that he was right. But if the fear of a name could save one mother from eviction, one girl from a locked room, then so be it. ... By midday, the heat had driven everyone outside. The community garden, once a trash-strewn lot behind the building, had become an oasis of mismatched chairs, tomato vines, and sunflowers taller than Lily. She sat cross-legged in the dirt, showing a small boy how to pull weeds without yanking up the roots. Watching her made something inside me unclench. Claudia found me on the back steps, a glass of cold lemonade in her hand. She passed it over, and we sat shoulder to shoulder, our legs brushing like sisters who'd grown up together instead of stumbling into each other's lives far too late. "You've built something good here, Tavia," she said. I snorted. "We built something. Good is a stretch. We still run out of nappies by the middle of the month, the boiler's older than my mother's lies, and we're one bad grant rejection away from closing our doors." Claudia nudged my knee with hers. "Good isn't perfect. Good is real. ... That night, I dreamed I was back in the Morrigan house. The marble floors cold under my bare feet. The portraits of grim ancestors glaring down at me. I stood before the drawing room doors, the same ones I'd pushed open on that night when they tried to bury me under shame and signatures. Inside, my father sat where he always did, glass of scotch in hand. Patrick stood behind him, his grin stretched too wide. And my mother, Celeste, sat apart, her back to me, her hair pinned into a perfect knot that would never loosen. They turned to look at me, their eyes hollow. My father raised his glass in mock salute. You'll never be rid of us, Octavia. I woke with the taste of old fear on my tongue, my skin damp with sweat. But as I lay there in the half-dark, the hum of the building around me, a baby's cry down the hall, someone laughing in the kitchen. I knew they were wrong. They were gone. The echo of them might live in my bones forever, but they couldn't touch what I'd built, what we'd built. Dash, 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 dot dot. When morning came, I found Lily in the garden again, watering the stubborn herbs that clung to life in rusty cans. She looked up at me with that sharp-eyed certainty she'd grown into since the day she first walked through our door. "Bad dreams?" she asked, like she could see the ghosts clinging to my hair. I shrugged. "Old ones. They fade." She pressed the watering can into my hands. "Help me. They grow better when you talk to them." So I did. We knelt side by side in the dirt, our fingers dark with soil, our voices soft. We talked to the rosemary and the thyme, the basil that never quite thrived but refused to die. We told them they were safe here, even when the storms came. Dash, 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 dot dot. By autumn, a fresh fight had found us. The same developer who'd tried to gut our block was back. New name, new shell company, the same rot at its core. They'd bought up the abandoned lot across the street, planning luxury flats that would push our people out one quiet eviction at a time. I sat in the back of a city council meeting, Felix beside me, Claudia at the podium tearing holes in the developer's lies. Lily sat on the floor near my feet, scribbling notes in her battered notebook. I saw myself in her then, the fire in her eyes, the rage she'd learned to aim instead of bury. When Claudia finished, the room erupted. Some clapping, some jeering. One counselor leaned forward, eyes cold. "Miss Morrigan, don't you think it's time you let the past stay buried? This constant fight, it's exhausting the city." I stood before I even realized it, my voice steady. "Maybe it should be exhausting. Maybe we should all be tired, tired enough to do better. Tired enough to stop pretending that greed gets to masquerade as progress." I felt Lily's hand slip into mine, her grip fierce. Claudia's eyes met mine from the dais. A silent promise that we weren't alone. Dash, 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 dot dot. The vote was close, but we won. Not because I threatened them with the weight of the Morrigan name, but because we showed them what community looks like when you refuse to bow to fear. After, we sat on the steps outside the council building. Me, Claudia, Felix, Lily. We shared a bag of chips like we hadn't just waged war in front of the city's power brokers. Lily popped a chip into her mouth. "Think they'll come back?" I laughed. The sound loud and real under the streetlights. "Always. That's what they do. And we'll keep fighting. That's what we do." Felix nudged Lily's shoulder. "You ever think you'd end up like this? Knee-deep in lawsuits and protest signs?" She shrugged. "Better than the alternative." Claudia raised her can of warm cola. "To better, to more, to all of it." We toasted with greasy fingers and tired smiles, and I knew, whatever storms came, we'd weather them together. Dash, 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 dot dot. Sometimes, late at night, I still wrote letters I'd never send. To Caldwell, who'd believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. To Piper, the tiny scrap of fur who'd shown me love without strings. To the girl I used to be, the one who stood in a drawing room full of knives disguised as family and chose to fight anyway. I told her we were still fighting. That every bruise and scar was worth it. That the family you choose, the one you build brick by stubborn brick, will hold you up when the world tries to push you down. When I closed my notebook, I'd tuck it back on the shelf next to the ledgers and court files. Then I'd slip into the hallway and stand at the threshold of our common room where someone was always awake. A volunteer making tea, a mother rocking her baby, Lily curled up on the sofa with her dog-eared paperback. This was my family now. This was my legacy, and I wouldn't trade it for all the marble corridors in the world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. I woke up that winter morning to the sound of laughter echoing up through the stairwell. It was a different sound from the old days. Not polite chuckles echoing off marble walls, but real, messy, full-bellied laughter. The kind that makes you believe the fight is worth it. even when the nights stretch long and the victories come with bruises. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and crept down the hallway to find Lily perched on the worn common room sofa, her legs tucked under her. A cup of cheap instant cocoa balanced on her knee. Claudia was beside her, her hair sticking up like she'd just rolled out of bed, which she probably had. Felix lounged in the battered armchair, feet propped on the coffee table he once threatened to burn for firewood. They all turned when I appeared. Lily grinned, eyes sparkling. "Morning, Tavia. We were just planning your hostile takeover of the entire city." Felix raised his mug. "Starting with the building next door. I heard the landlord's a bastard. Perfect for your brand." I barked out a laugh that startled the old radiator back to life with a rattle. "I thought you liked sleep. Or peace." Claudia tossed a pillow at me. "We like you more. It should have felt like pressure, the constant push to be the center of this place, the anchor when the waves hit. But it didn't. Not anymore. It felt like home. ... The new building became our next fight. It was a grim old block of flats, half abandoned, the windows boarded up, the front steps littered with needles and empty cans. The kind of place my father's people once bought for pennies, gutted, then sold for millions while the families inside scattered like dust. I walked through it with Lily and Claudia one freezing afternoon. Each step echoed in the dark hallways, the air thick with the stale tang of mold and old despair. Lily's flashlight swept over walls tattooed with graffiti and old eviction notices. "Think it's worth saving?" she asked, her voice small in the cavernous stairwell. I traced a finger over one cracked wall, imagining what new paint and warm lights might do to this place. "It's worth trying." Claudia sighed. "You realize we're broke, right? The council grant barely covers the Piper project's heating bill." I looked at her. "When did that ever stop us?" She snorted. "Remind me to never play poker with you. ... Felix did what Felix did best. He dug into the landlord's finances, found a tangle of unpaid taxes, shady shell companies, and enough illegal tenancy agreements to keep him tied up in court for years. I watched Felix work sometimes, his fingers flying over his keyboard like a pianist hammering out a war anthem. "You know," he said one night, leaning back in his chair, eyes half closed with exhaustion, "there was a time you hated me." I looked up from my stack of files. "I didn't hate you, I just didn't trust you." "Same thing," he grinned, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Funny how trust and betrayal live next door to each other." I closed my laptop, setting my pen aside. "You've never betrayed me, Felix." He tilted his head. "Not yet." I laughed and threw a balled-up scrap of paper at him. "Shut up and get me those land records. ... The day the court gave us the building, I stood outside it for hours, the keys heavy in my coat pocket. I ran my hand over the rusted doorknob, half expecting to feel my father's cold fingers guiding me away. But the street was quiet. The only ghosts here were the ones I chose to carry. Lily found me there, her boots crunching through the frost. "You gonna stand here all day, boss?" "Maybe." She leaned against the wall beside me. "You know, you don't have to fix everything." "I know. But you're going to try anyway." I looked at her. This girl who'd once walked into my office with her heart stitched together by hope and stubbornness. "Yeah, I am." She bumped her shoulder into mine. "Good. Let's start with windows. And heat? And maybe a roof that doesn't leak on people while they sleep. ... We didn't have money for fancy contractors or glossy redevelopment plans. We had volunteers, leftover paint, secondhand furniture donated by people who'd once needed a bed themselves. Each floor we reclaimed felt like dragging breath into a body that had forgotten how to live. Claudia brokered deals with the council, squeezing pennies out of places even my father's accountants couldn't have found. Felix ran stories that shamed local businesses into donating supplies. Tax write-offs, he called them. But I knew better. Guilt is a powerful tool when wielded with care. One night, I stood in what would become the new shelter wing. Walls freshly painted a soft yellow that Lily insisted on. The floors were still bare, the windows drafty. But it smelled like hope. Claudia came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist like an anchor. "You okay?" "I think so." She rested her chin on my shoulder. "I wish Caldwell could see this." "Me too." We stood there, the weight of old scars pressed into something that felt almost like grace. The night we opened the first floor, we threw a party, if you could call stale biscuits, cheap soda, and mismatched mugs a party. But the laughter made the cracked walls warm, the air soft with something that felt like family. Lily stood on a battered table, tapping a spoon against a cup until the room hushed. She raised her mug high. "To Octavia Morrigan," she shouted, "who reminds us every day that family is what you fight for, not what you're born into." I felt my cheeks flush, my heart stumbling in my chest. Claudia whooped. Felix wolf whistled. And for a moment, the ghosts were just shadows at the edge of the room, powerless to do anything but watch. Later, after the party had melted into soft snores and half-finished mugs of tea, I sat in the dark hallway, my back against the cool plaster. Lily slipped out of her makeshift bunk room, her blanket draped around her shoulders. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked. She sat beside me, pulling her knees to her chest. "Did you ever wish it had turned out different, that your family hadn't?" "Broken?" She nodded. I thought of my father's threats, my brother's cruelty, my mother's sad apologies whispered too late. I thought of Caldwell's grave, Piper's tiny plot of flowers behind Claudia's office. "No," I said finally. "If it had turned out different, I wouldn't have this." She rested her head on my shoulder. "Then I'm glad they broke." I laughed, pressing my lips to her hair. "Me too." Sometimes, when the wind howls down our street and rattles the windows we haven't yet replaced, I imagine the drawing room at the old Morrigan estate. Empty now, its floors cold, its portraits watching dust settle, where power once roared. They can keep their ghosts. I have my own, and mine don't haunt me. They remind me what's worth saving. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Sometimes I wonder if the old version of me, the one who sat frozen in that drawing room while my family circled like vultures, would even recognize the woman I've become. I hope she would. I hope she'd see the fight was worth it. The winter that followed the takeover of the abandoned flats was the hardest we'd ever faced. London turned bitter and gray, the wind slicing through gaps in the old brickwork like knives. The heating sputtered more often than not, and we stretched every donated blanket and coat until we couldn't anymore. Claudia worked herself raw, chasing every grant and legal loophole she could find to keep the lights on. Felix's articles drew more eyes to our cause, some kind, some cruel. Lily and the volunteers set up emergency cots, lined the basement walls with space heaters, and took turns boiling kettles to keep frostbite from creeping into fingers and toes. One night, a storm knocked out the power. I stood in the common room with a box of candles and matches, Lily by my side. She watched me light flame after flame, her eyes wide in the flickering glow. "It feels like the end of the world," she whispered. I struck another match, the sulfur sharp in the cold air. "It's not the end, it's just another storm." We placed candles along the windowsills and across the battered tables. One by one, the frightened murmurs softened. Children played shadow puppets on the walls. A mother sang a lullaby in a language I didn't know. Claudia found me later, hands buried deep in her coat pockets, her breath misting in the half-dark. "You're good at this," she said, "making people feel safe in places that shouldn't feel safe at all." "It's not just me," I said, glancing at Lily asleep on the sofa, a child curled under her arm. "It's all of us." "That's what scares them most, you know," Claudia said, "that you made people believe they could do it without the Morrigan name." I laughed, the sound warm in the cold. "Good, let them be scared." When the power came back, so did the trouble. The developer we'd beaten last year resurfaced with new backers, dangling hush money in front of the city council like rotten meat. They promised new jobs, shiny flats, foreign investors. I saw the flyers taped to the lampposts on my way to a meeting downtown. Future, not charity. I tore one down and crumpled it in my fist. Felix met me on the corner, camera in hand. He snapped a picture of the shredded poster. "They're terrified of you," he said, grinning. "If they have to smear you with words like charity, you've already won." "I'm tired of winning the same war over and over," I said. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Then we keep fighting until they're too tired to fight back." Lily spoke at the council hearing that month. She stood behind the battered podium in her thrift store coat, chin up, voice steady. She told them about nights sleeping on benches, about the first night she walked through our doors and found a family she chose. "You want to tear this place down for flats none of us can afford," she said, her voice sharp as a blade. "Do it, but know you're tearing down the last place that ever gave people like me a chance." She stepped down to thunderous applause. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, pride and grief knotting in my throat. "You were braver than I ever was," I whispered. She shrugged, eyes wet. "I had you. ... We won that vote by 3 miserable ballots." Claudia and I stood in the stairwell afterward, both of us shaking with exhaustion. "It's never going to stop, is it?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, but neither will we. ... Spring came slow. The kind of spring that makes you believe the world is waking up new, even if you're not sure you trust it yet." The Piper Project's new wing opened in April. Lily painted a mural on the side wall, wildflowers breaking through concrete, roots tangling into the bricks. She signed it in the corner, "To the ones who chose to stay." Felix brought a reporter from a national outlet that day. She asked me what it felt like to be Octavia Morgan, the woman who tore down her family to build something new. I smiled for the cameras, but my answer was for me. "It feels like I've finally stopped being theirs." We marked the 1-year anniversary of the old family meeting with tea and cheap biscuits in the common room. Claudia made a toast, her voice warm with mischief. "To Octavia, who walked into the lion's den with nothing but her name and walked out with a pack she built herself." Lily threw a paper crown on my head, and everyone cheered. I laughed so hard I cried. That night, after everyone drifted to sleep, I stepped into the garden behind the building. The wildflowers over Piper's grave swayed in the moonlight. I crouched there, fingers brushing the petals. "You'd like it here," I whispered. "You'd like who I became." The wind carried my words up through the broken brick and out into the dark, far from the cold halls of the Morgan estate, far from the ghosts that could no longer touch me. And for once, I didn't dream of marble floors or locked rooms. I dreamed of sunflowers in Lily's mural, of Claudia's laughter, of Felix's terrible jokes, of the hush of children asleep in warm beds we fought to keep. I dreamed of family, the kind you choose. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Lily spoke at the council hearing that month. She stood behind the battered podium in her thrift store coat, chin up, voice steady. She told them about nights sleeping on benches, about the first night she walked through our doors and found a family she chose. "You want to tear this place down for flats none of us can afford?" she said, her voice sharp as a blade. "Do it. But know you're tearing down the last place that ever gave people like me a chance." She stepped down to thunderous applause. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, pride and grief knotting in my throat. "You were braver than I ever was," I whispered. She shrugged, eyes wet. "I had you. ... We won that vote by 3 miserable ballots." Claudia and I stood in the stairwell afterward, both of us shaking with exhaustion. "It's never going to stop, is it?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, but neither will we." Spring came slow. The kind of spring that makes you believe the world is waking up new, even if you're not sure you trust it yet. The Piper Project's new wing opened in April. Lily painted a mural on the side wall, wildflowers breaking through concrete, roots tangling into the bricks. She signed it in the corner, "To the ones who chose to stay." Felix brought a reporter from a national outlet that day. She asked me what it felt like to be Octavia Morgan, the woman who tore down her family to build something new. I smiled for the cameras, but my answer was for me. It feels like I finally stopped being theirs. .. We marked the 1-year anniversary of the old family meeting with tea and cheap biscuits in the common room. Claudia made a toast, her voice warm with mischief. To Octavia, who walked into the lion's den with nothing but her name and walked out with a pack she built herself. Lily threw a paper crown on my head and everyone cheered. I laughed so hard I cried. ... That night, after everyone drifted to sleep, I stepped into the garden behind the building. The wildflowers over Piper's grave swayed in the moonlight. I crouched there, fingers brushing the petals. "You'd like it here," I whispered. "You'd like who I became." The wind carried my words up through the broken brick and out into the dark, far from the cold halls of the Morrigan estate, far from the ghosts that could no longer touch me. And for once, I didn't dream of marble floors or locked rooms. I dreamed of sunflowers in Lily's mural, of Claudia's laughter, of Felix's terrible jokes, of the hush of children asleep in warm beds we fought to keep. I dreamed of family, the kind you choose. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The second year after that emergency family meeting began not with a storm, but with sunlight. The kind that creeps through dusty windows and makes even cracked floors look golden. It was early, too early for the Piper project to hum with its usual chaos. But I was already awake, my hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea that had long since gone cold. I thought about the silence in that drawing room the night they tried to break me. How I'd once believed silence meant defeat. But now, in this battered building where no two floorboards matched, silence was my sanctuary. It was the quiet before the doors opened, and the world poured in. Voices and laughter and tears and stories. All the noise that made this place alive. Claudia padded in, wearing one of Lily's old hoodies and mismatched socks, her hair a bird's nest of stubborn curls. She sank onto the chair across from me, stealing my mug without asking. "You should be sleeping," she said, sipping my cold tea. "So should you." We sat like that for a while, two women who'd learned that rest was as much a rebellion as any headline. When she finally spoke again, her voice was soft. "Do you ever miss them?" She didn't need to explain who she meant. I stared at the rising sun through our cracked window. "No," I said, honest. "I miss the idea of what they should have been. But I don't miss them." She grinned, teeth flashing in the early light. "Good. ... The spring brought new families. New faces. Some stayed for a week, others for months. Each one left a mark. A note tucked under the front desk, a flower planted in the garden, a mural painted by the kids on the basement wall. Each goodbye felt like proof that the fight mattered. One morning, Lily found me hunched over stacks of paperwork, the weight of too many forms and too little time pressing down like a stone. "Take a break," she ordered, dropping a cheese toastie on my desk. I looked up, pretending to scowl. "Don't boss me around." She stuck out her tongue. I learned from the best. I took a bite, and for a moment the world shrank to something simple. Bread, cheese, a girl who once had nowhere to go and now called this place home. ... In May, the city threatened our funding again. The developer rebranded. New investors, slick new slogans. Revitalize. Modernize. Monetize. I sat in endless meetings with suits who spoke in percentages and, quote, market value, like they'd never set foot inside a soup kitchen. Claudia and I fought them with every legal trick she'd picked up in a lifetime of outsmarting men in tailored suits. Felix published stories that dug up every shady deal they'd made in the shadows. And when that didn't stop them, we took it to the streets. I stood on the back of a borrowed truck outside City Hall, my voice raw from shouting. The crowd roared back. Neighbors, families, volunteers, people I'd never met, but who'd heard our story and decided to stand with us. "You can't buy what we've built," I shouted, voice cracking. "You can't bulldoze hope." Somewhere in that sea of faces, I saw Lily, her fist raised. Claudia standing beside her, a fortress in a faded coat. And I knew we'd win. Maybe not today, maybe not this year. But we'd outlast them. Because this wasn't just a building, it was a promise. Dash 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 dot dot. When the vote came down in our favor, the celebration was a mess of cheap champagne and tears. I found Felix on the fire escape, a cigarette burning low between his fingers. "You did it again," he said, blowing smoke into the night. I leaned against the railing. "We did it," he chuckled. "Your father must be rolling in whatever pit he ended up in." "Good," I said. "He can stay there." Felix snuffed out the cigarette, flicking the butt into the street. "You ever think about what's next?" "All the time." "And?" I looked at the lights in the windows below. Families eating dinner, children laughing, someone playing an out-of-tune guitar. Next is more of this. As long as they come for us, we fight. As long as they try to silence us, we speak louder. And when I'm gone, someone else will keep going. He nodded. "Hell of a legacy, Morrigan." I nudged him with my elbow. "Stop calling me that." Dash, 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 dot, dot. By midsummer, the Piper project had doubled in size. The flats across the street were secured for low-income families. The garden bloomed with flowers and vegetables, tended by tiny hands and tired ones alike. One evening, Lily dragged me out to the garden where the wildflowers over Piper's grave glowed in the dusk. She handed me a scrap of paper, a letter, written in her looping scrawl, to the woman who gave me a key when I didn't know what a door looked like. To the woman who taught me that family isn't who shares your blood, but who shares your fight. To Octavia Morrigan, and to the name she made her own. I hugged her tight, my tears soaking her hair. "You're what makes this worth it." She pulled back, smirking. "Then you better stick around. I've got plans." "Plans?" She nodded. "Someday, I'm going to run this place. Then I'll build one bigger, and then bigger than that. You'll see." My laughter echoed through the garden. "I believe you." Dash dash dash, dot dot. The ghosts come less now. When they do, I let them sit beside me for a while, reminders of what I escaped, what I survived. I don't push them away anymore. They can stay as long as they stay quiet. Sometimes I write to Caldwell. Sometimes I talk to Piper. Sometimes I stand at the edge of the common room and watch the people I chose, the ones who chose me back. This is the family they could never take from me. The one I fought for. The one that fights for me. And when they come again, because they always will, they'll find the door locked, the lights on, the voices inside loud enough to drown out any storm. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.